This is SQL Server Maintenance 101, the stuff you didn't know you needed to know for your SQL Server. I think every single thing I'm going to talk about applies to SQL 2005 and above. There might be some nuances in there. There might be a couple of features that are additions and whatnot, but maintenance back in the 7.0 and 2000 days was different. So the way I'm going to do this is approach three different things: backups, CheckDB, and index and stats maintenance. Those are the main three. They're definitely not the only three things you need to do for maintenance, but this is a get you started kind of thing. SQL Server out of the box does not do any maintenance on its own. It doesn't do backups out of the box. It has the code, it just doesn't automatically set them up. It doesn't run CheckDB, which looks for corruption, and it doesn't do any index or stats maintenance. It doesn't create your indexes for you. There's some automatic things you can do at the database level to update stats, but of these things, that's all it gives you. So if you wait long enough and you don't do any of these things, a couple things could happen. Either your queries are going to get really, really slow because stuff's out of date and fragmented like crazy. You're going to have corruption you didn't know about, or you're going to wind up, the most common thing in SQL Server is filling up a transaction log file because you didn't know you needed to back it up. And it filled up the hard drive, and now your server won't respond to insert statements and things like that. And you've got 2 terabytes worth of log file you've got to deal with somehow. I want to alleviate that pain for you. If you take nothing else away, screenshot this screen. I'll give you 3 seconds to do that. 1, 2, 3. All right. The idea of backups is pretty straightforward to everybody, but the idea of backups inside SQL Server gets real fuzzy real quick if you're a non-DBA that doesn't really know even how user databases are structured. Very high levelly put, there's a data file and a log file. That's a minimum for every database. The different types of backups, and there's like 8 or 9 different types, including partials and file group and this and that. But the main ones that we talk about as DBAs are full database backup, which gets all the data which is stored in pages on your data file. It backs that up. A differential is everything since the last full. It ties back to the full. You can't have just a straight differential with no full because it won't know where it belongs. There's a whole log sequence number and tracking mechanism in the metadata behind your backups and the headers and whatnot that keeps track of that for you. And the transaction log backup, if your database is in full recovery model, you can back up the transaction log, which is a log of the transactions, and that gives you high-level overstated, that gives you point-in-time recovery. So if you have a database and 10 minutes worth of data is critically important to you, you don't want to be in simple recovery where you're only as good as your last full or full plus differential. So these are choices that you get to make. I won't go into the nuances of that necessarily, but these 3 database backup types are the most common ones. Backup and restore is not an HA solution. It's part of a disaster recovery solution. Backing it up, testing your restores, that's great, but if you've got a 12 terabyte database, that doesn't restore quickly, so it's not HA. It's not highly available. That's usually measured in minutes or seconds. Other things in SQL Server get you closer to that. None of these things we're talking about today do. But I hear people use those terms interchangeably, and they shouldn't. Now you know that. Best practices, the asterisk is there because these are my best practices when I know nothing else about your server and I've been brought in to set up reliability and do performance tuning and whatever, which is my entire client base here at Dallas DBA. So Dallas DBA website, and click around on things. We got a decent blog there as well. So if your databases are small, 10s or a couple hundred gigs, you can get away on most of the time with a full backup every day. Just run, something like run that at midnight. And then if it's where you want to have that point-in-time recovery, back up your transaction log every some number of minutes. 15 is my default. If I know that your recovery point objective or the amount of data loss you can tolerate is only 5 minutes, I'm going to back it up every 4 minutes. So I'm ahead of the game by 1 minute. It doesn't matter if I do 1 every hour or 4 every 1 every 15 minutes. I'm going to have the same amount of log files, just 4 files instead of 1, but they're going to all be the same size. So it doesn't really matter. And backups on these days really don't impact your performance in a noticeable manner if you do it often enough. And even if you're taking a long time, back 1,000 to back up in the middle of the day could crash a server because memory space was only 3 gigs and the hard drives were spinning disks and just all kinds of reasons. Another best practice, even if you back up locally, put in something to get it off the box. Ideally, get it out of the building, like up to Azure Cold Storage or something. If you're storing backups where your data are, you've got two potential problems. Server crashes, it's all gone. Ransomware comes in, potentially all of it gets encrypted, and now you're host. Get it off the box onto a file server, into some immutable storage, something away from where the data lives is a best practice. We've dealt with 4 different ransomware events over the last couple of years that could have been prevented by good security and backups not being in the same place. They all managed to drag something together to reconstitute the data, so no businesses went down. But that's becoming more and more of a problem, the ransomware issue. So be aware of that, please. Test your restores. I'm going to paraphrase something that Jeff Hyten said years and years ago. If you don't do test restores, you don't have a disaster recovery plan. You have a disaster recovery hope. And it couldn't be any more true. Then today, it's exactly the same. If your backups are going onto a corrupt drive and they're corrupt, you won't know until it comes time to do an emergency restore. And then everyone's going to look at you and say, why did you not test the restores? There are ways to do this. But testing those is part of the backup process. It's just not a task built into SQL Server that you can click some buttons and make happen. You want to, if you got backup jobs, look at those jobs. Make sure that you're alerting on failed jobs. So if it's failing, you at least know about it. Even if you don't know what to do, you'll have an error message you can Google. And encrypt your backups. That helps you a little bit. You know, that might help you from internal problems. I don't know that if it would keep a ransomware bad actor from encrypting your encrypted backup with their own key. I'm told that is possible. I haven't tested it. That's all I have to say on the backups as far as the chit chat about them. Let's go input some. All right, I've got MySQL 2022. This look, if you were in the 2 months ago webinar about installing, this probably looks similar. It's not the exact same one because that machine crashed on me. It was an Azure VM that would decided didn't want to restore. So I've got 2 databases on here. Coffee, I know you're surprised to see that, and the Stack Overflow I brought in for some other reasons. It's way too big for a demo. So we're going to work on this Coffee database. SQL Server gives you a couple of ways to do stuff internally that Microsoft supports because it's part of the product. Write your own code, which you don't want to do because it's incredibly silly to do that at this point, or use what they call maintenance plans. These are drag and drop kind of things, and if you know anything about SQL Server integration services and designing packages, this is going to be familiar. You don't need to have SSIS installed to make this happen. You can wizard your way through it. I probably should have clicked on the wizard button. I'm not going to do that, but this is here, and it will help you do an awful lot of stuff. I'm going to do this manually, and I'm going to call this one just backups, or let's call it full backup. I do like to separate things out, so if one of these plans gets messed up somehow, it doesn't mess up all the others. We've got this task here, and this little toolbox over here appeared when I brought this up. It wasn't there before. If you click on that and just give it a second, it's supposed to load up and give me a bunch of tasks. And there they are. These are a bunch of different things that you can literally drag and drop to make this package or this plan do whatever you want. We're going to keep it really simple for right now and just drag over backup database task. And the reason I'm showing you this, some of you are screaming at your monitor, though, why don't you use some other mechanism you want at the end? But this is built in, like I said, and Microsoft supports this. So that's what we want to use. Is at the very beginning, we want to be able to call for support when something breaks, especially if you're not a DBA and don't know how to interpret some of these things. So funny thing about this is that red X looks like an error happened. It's just very confused right now. If I go away and then I come back, I can bring up some stuff. And now that connection manager was barking about just says, I'm connecting to the local server, and it's fine. Just one of those little quirks in the product. So the backup type, the very first thing I said was that we have to start with a full backup. That's what we're going to do for just the Coffee database because I don't want this plan to take forever. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to pick just the Coffee one. You should set up another plan for your system databases. If the whole server crashes, you want those. You want that master database, master and MSDB for sure, maybe model. This is just user stuff that I'm doing right here. So just this one. I hit OK, and it's the database, and I want it to go to disk. And then I've got to tell it where to go. Right here in the properties of the server, this is modal, I can't do it. In the properties of the server, when I installed this, I designated the X drive as being my SQL backup location. That's where this got picked up. If you're doing multiple databases, please check this box. What that does, it just creates a folder for each database. The computer doesn't care. The server doesn't care. Your eyes care when you're trying to go find a file. You want it to be logical or organized by the database. If you don't, that's okay too. That's not required. It's a given best practice. So we're going to back that up. We're going to get into the file extension of BAK, not .BAK, because that causes other weird problems. And in the options, if there's a bunch of stuff we could do in here, I want to, at the very least, for this, do verify the integrity and perform a checksum. I could encrypt it right here, but I'm not going to. And you can mess around with block size and transfer size. That really is much more important on larger databases where you need things to move faster. I'm taking a lot of defaults here just for simplicity. You can view the T-SQL if you want here, or you can just hit OK, and now we've got it. If you want to go ahead and schedule it from here, you certainly can. You can do that right here, subplan, and you just go through and pick. Let's just say we're going to do this on, take the defaults every week, Sunday morning, 12 a.m. We're going to back up the coffee database. Close this, asks you to save, and now we refresh because it doesn't do it for me, and we have a full backup plan. We also have, refresh the jobs, we should have, with any luck, a full backup subplan 1. When you see that, you know your job that you're looking at in this list of 200 jobs is probably a maintenance plan job. Now, with any luck, this will actually work. I'm going to start the job, and then I'll go over and show you the backup file that landed on the drive. It's a small database. All right, X drive, SQL backups, coffee folder that got created because I checked that box, and there's my backup. What's really cool, it's got the date and timestamp. That seems like it ought to, like it always had that for some of you that are not as old as I am. It used to be that you still can put multiple backups into one physical file on disk, but this does it to keep it separate so you know which one you're looking at. It's better just to have an individual file per full and per log backup. Dumping a bunch of them into one file makes it much harder to go find the one you need when restore time comes around at 3 in the morning. Okay, so this did exactly what I wanted it to. I don't remember if I put the coffee database in full. Yes, by default, the full database, full recovery model allows me to go back up the transaction log, so I have that point-in-time recovery I was talking about. I do this all the time. I reopen and close the same windows all the time. The database the backup I just took is listed right there, and it shows me that I don't have a log backup. I, of course, have a log, and there's nothing in it because I only put in, 1,000 rows or something like that into the table here. Oh, by the way, my coffee database was entirely created by ChatGPT, including populating it. So that was kind of a mildly amusing thing this morning. So I want to back up my logs. I don't want to confuse my plans. So I literally will go into the maintenance plans, set up a new one, and call it log backup. All the maintenance items are going to have their own plan. Spoiler alert. If I wanted to take the time, I would go back in here, do all the same stuff, another backup task, and then just change it over from full to differential or log, depending on what I want to do. If you've got a multi-terabyte database, you don't want a full backup every night. It's going to take forever and take a lot of space. A Sunday full and 6 days, Monday through Saturday, of differentials is a much better idea there. Turn on compression. There's no reason not to. I didn't set it up on this one because it's such a small database, but you definitely want to do compressed backups that go faster and take up less space. So we'll go ahead and finish setting this one up for the coffee database. Do that, back up to disk. So I want it to go in the same location. I have to click this box again because this is a completely different backup task, even though it looks exactly the same because the structure is the same. And the options, verify, perform checksum. Don't worry about the rest of it for now, unless I just want to go force it to do compression. That's one place you can do it. Hit OK. This is all good. We'll schedule this to run daily, every 15, not hours, but minutes and not seconds. And save it on the way out the door. refresh. This is a lot of clicking and it's easy to misclick some stuff, and that's kind of part of my point that I'm going to get to in a little bit. And the nice thing is I can start the job from here by hitting execute or start this job. Now this is going to succeed. There's no reason it shouldn't because I have a full backup. The differential and the log backups, those tie to the full that they came from. SQL Server tracks that for you. Just have to have a full first to get everything started, to call it the backup chain. So that's done. There it is, right there. I didn't give it an extension. What? Oh, well, give it an extension. Let's go fix that error, that egregious error I just made. I thought I gave it one. I thought it defaulted one. It did have one. That's probably just Windows Explorer not showing me stuff properly. All right, so that's backups. Very basic. Full, differential, log, by far the three most common types you will see. If you go to the properties of any database and log, if it's an important database and you've set it to full recovery, that means you at least have the potential that you can do point-in-time recovery. If you haven't done a test restore, you have no idea if you can actually do that or not, but you've set it up to try it. Big databases get the differentials. If you've got any questions on this, I didn't go into file groups and partials and things like that because those are not 101 level topics, but fire those off at Jeff. All right, so maintenance plans, drag, drop, click some things, schedule it, pick your schedule, make sure the job showed up, do a test run of the job. There's a lot of clicking, but it's fairly user-friendly as far as I can tell. Used to be maintenance plans were absolutely horrible a number of versions ago. So moving on, the next thing, CheckDB. We call it that because that's the command that it runs. But what you're looking for here in your database. Now, all you senior DBAs that are listening or experienced DBAs, start cringing. Just go ahead and get your tomatoes out to throw at me. Your corruption is very loosely defined as the pages of data or index data in your file don't have proper linkages. There's a lot of other things about corruption we could say, but the links between the pages aren't there properly or they got messed up. So if you need data that's on pages 1, 2, and 3 of your data file, and they can't find 2, that's a problem. You're not going to get correct results. You're probably going to get an error message come up on your screen or in your app, or worse, on your web page that the customer just saw. Corruption almost always leads to data loss. If you get lucky and you have corruption in a non-clustered index, rebuilding might save that, but you still have to figure out why you got corruption in the first place. Check for corruption as often as you can without interrupting production. Corruption does that one database at a time, one table at a time, go through and run checks. And it does a lot of locking on those tables as it does it. It may create a snapshot of the database and do it there. It may not. There's a lot of it depends in this area. The takeaway here is early and often. The second you find it, you need to get somebody involved that can help you with that. If you call Microsoft, the very first thing they're going to say, and have for 20 years, is, have you done a restore from your last good backup? You don't know if your backup is corruption-free if you don't test for it. We're going to get to that. So corruption, I will say it over and over and over, early and often. I would send you, if it's a critically important database and you know that, thousands of dollars a minute are going away, you want to call somebody, you want to call Microsoft. You want to go to Brent Nozar's What to Do in the Case of Corruption article, and that's not the right name for it, but you can Google it. And a guy named Steve, I want to say he's out of Kansas City. He is one of the most highly regarded people that can actually help you with a corrupt database, but he's not going to help you bring it back online in an emergency. He might help you piece the bits back together, and he's not cheap. Worth it. If you're losing $10,000 a day, he's definitely worth it. But almost always, now corruption can be caused by disk issues, driver issues. Some versions of SQL Server come out the door with a bug and they have to get patched. As recently as 2014 that I know of, maybe more recently. Microsoft makes mistakes too. It's enterprise software. It's hard. You can't release a bug-free product on anything. Neither can Microsoft, no matter how many people they throw at it. But it's not to be ignored. Okay, I've oversold that one. Best practices around it. I run it early and often. I run it daily if I can, weekly as a minimum. I don't really give my own clients much leeway on that. I just tell them that's what I'm going to do, and then we find out an efficient way to do it. My preferred method, and I can't do it in production, is to go out to dbatools.io and this test DBA last backup in the second bullet point there, subpoint, that will pull down from your where you do your backups. It'll pull a copy of the backup down. It'll do a restore, so you've done your test restore right there, and then it'll run CheckDB against it, which is checking the database for corruption. That's what CheckDB is. Thank you, Paul Randall. And then it'll delete it. If it finds corruption or fails a restore somewhere, the job will fail. And as a good almost DBA, you've set up an alert to tell you that that job failed. That's when that one fails. That's when you know you need to go address that before you address anything else. Is the job broken, or is there corruption in the database, or did my restore fail for some reason? Does all that, just a little bit of PowerShell. Import a module and run a command, feed a few parameters into it. It's fairly easy. Any of these maintenance jobs that error out on you or kick something out overnight, you really want to be looking at those errors. Ashish asks, what CheckDB strategy do you use for a terabyte size DB? Probably exactly the one I just said, tested on a dev box. In most cases, a corrupt database will probably back up and can probably be restored. You can run it then, the CheckDB on that. And if you're doing it on a terabyte database, you definitely don't want to be doing that in production. You probably won't get it done overnight, because I'm guessing you also have a lot of reporting stuff that happens overnight. That's why I like to do it off box when I can. When these maintenance jobs fail, don't ignore the errors. Look for help when corruption comes up, because very few people know how to deal with that properly. Oh, the Steve Stedman I mentioned, he's got a lot of, he did a whole corruption challenge thing where he put stuff out there and challenged you to solve it. Go look and see what people did for some of those different types of things. It's pretty cool. I have not run through those because it's not, but they looked like they were fantastic exercises to look at that kind of stuff. So, demo, how to set this up. Surprise, surprise, we're going to the maintenance plans again. New maintenance plan. I always just call this CheckDB or something very similar, because when some other DBA follows me because I've left the company or the contract is over or whatever, I want them to be able to understand what they're looking at as soon as they log on and look at Management Studio. So checked database integrity, that's CheckDB. Edit this, and we're going to check all the databases. Don't focus on, and I see this all the time, just your most important. Don't focus on just the coffee database or just the Stack Overflow. Do all of them unless you can't. Because if your model database, arguably the least important database in the entire system, if it's got corruption, that same problem may involve your main production database next. Check everything, please. Make my life better. All right, so by default, it's going to include indexes, and it's going to do a physical only. You can do some max DOP here, so it only uses, I don't know what it uses by default. If somebody wants to tell Jeff, he'll tell me just as a curiosity. For this purpose, these defaults are fine. This is going to be doing the basic checks. Locking the table, tab lock, you may or may not want to do that, especially if you're doing stuff overnight. You don't want reports and CheckDBs colliding and causing problems. Let's go with the default. We're going to schedule this to run at, because these databases are a good size. Let's do this daily at 1 a.m. because our fulls, our full backups are running. We don't really want those both going at the same time. I'll put that in. I'm not going to run this one because Stack Overflow would take forever. But save on the way out the door. I really wish maintenance plans would refresh, but they don't. They do jobs. So it's there. Here's something you need to know about maintenance plan jobs. If this full backup fails and you go and right click and view history and try to figure out, all it's going to do is tell you that it failed. The history for a maintenance plan failure is actually in the maintenance plan right there. That's what's going to tell you what the actual failure message was. Just in case you can't find it and don't know where it is, now you know. All right, we are halfway through. There's not a whole lot else to say about CheckDB other than set it up, run it a lot, and now I'm repeating myself, so I'll stop. All right, my favorite one. Indexes pay my mortgage. Okay, indexes paid my mortgage. I spend more time doing indexing and work and explaining and teaching than I do anything else in my job here at Dallas DBAs. Indexes very simply are the pages, among other things, are the pages at the back of a textbook. If you go to a book and you look up the word server, you flip to the back, find out all the different pages that the word server is on. That is a non-clustered index. If you're old enough like me and you remember the white pages where everybody's listed by last name, first name, address in order, so you could find Hill, Kevin, and where I live, that's a clustered index. The actual data itself is in order by whatever you decide. Somebody asked the question when they registered for this, I forget who it was, but the question was essentially, why don't the developers put keys on tables, meaning presumably primary keys and or clustered indexes? And my answer is, I don't know. Perhaps they don't know what they should be on. Generally should be on something that is going to be used when queries do scans. I like to use the example of give me all the sales last month. If all the sales are in date order last month, it's real easy to find. Some people just default to putting a column in there, a surrogate key, if you will, that just has one. It's just an integer, and every new row gets the next number in line. That works, especially if it's a clustered primary key. But do you really ever search for that? Maybe not. This is not an index design presentation, but more of a indexes are important. Indexes do get fragmented. If I've got a full index page and I add a new record, the index gets updated. Now I've got 2 half full pages. Okay. There's logical and physical fragmentation. I almost said corruption. In the days of solid state drives, compared to the days that still exist for some places of spinning disks, I like to call them fidget spinners, in an index is nowhere near as important. If you've gone to dba.stackexchange.com to look up something, you probably have seen something by Paul White, exceptionally smart guy. I'm going to paraphrase him and something he told me. He said, give me enough memory and I'll never defrag another index. And he's right. But in some cases, it is important to defrag those because SQL Server Standard limits you to the amount of memory you can have. You can have terabytes of memory on the box, but it's only going to allow you to use a certain amount of it. Fragmented data and index pages in memory take up more space. If you have that edge case, or that use case, you might want to defrag your largest indexes, not every single thing, after they get to a certain large percent. Microsoft out of the box defaults to, if you just turn it on and let it loose and take the defaults, and we'll see this, indexes that are 1,000 pages, 1,000 8K pages is 8 megs. That's tiny. And it will deal with fragmentation one way or another, starting at 5% fragmentation. That is super aggressive and almost useless, especially if you've got enough memory to cover all your data and do all the things you need. I use much less aggressive parameters, bigger indexes, much higher levels. It's got to be fragmented like 30, 40, 50% for me to even think about it. And maybe 10,000 pages. I've got a customer, we don't touch anything under 100,000 pages. Statistics are critically important for performance. This is way bigger deal than index fragmentation, much, much bigger. A statistic, very simply, is a sampling of the data in a given index or column, whether the column is in an index or not, to query optimizer to be able to make good decisions about how many rows it's going to need to retrieve and how much resources it's going to use. With those statistics get stale because you've not been updating them, the query optimizer gets a little drunk and starts just getting wildly out of control. You have to throw him out of the bar at some point. He's running around trying to join tables that don't belong together and all that. It's the old join tables joke. But bad stats or stale stats can lead to bad decisions. You can get too small of a plan. You can get too big of a plan. Either it takes longer or you waste resources and whatnot. Fortunately for you, dear listener, stats are fairly easy to update. An update stats job is going to run a whole lot faster than an index defrag job most of the time. If you rebuild an index, you're going to get new stats anyway. But my best practice is when I have to defrag indexes or rebuild/reorganize, I do those once a week. stats every night, if not more. Sometimes I will do stats right before the business day starts or even at lunch. I have one client, I rebuild some big tables with full scan every 4 hours because that's what it takes to keep his system running. That's an extreme edge case because their data changes a lot and they get tons and tons of new data all the time. If you deal with both of these things, you get happier users. Index tuning itself, index creation and all that is a whole different topic, but let's assume your index is all right. If they're maintained and they're happy, the query optimizer is happy, the resource utilization is where it needs to be, and the queries come back fast, and that's all your users really care about. Does it come back fast with no errors? Truly. So I think I already mentioned 30 to 50%. This is my generic default that I use. When I get to know a customer a little bit better, I adjust these as necessary. 10,000 pages, I mentioned that. Stats daily with the default sample size. For Microsoft, the bigger the smaller the default sample size gets, so they don't spend all day doing stats on a giant table. Somebody asked a question at one point about, I forget exactly how it was worded, but scheduling the update stats when the auto update statistics feature of a database or option of a database is set to true. I want to control my stats updating. If I get bonus updates, by SQL Server doing it from auto update during the day, fine with me, as long as the sample size is correct. Whatever correct means, more often than not the default. But you can set it to be the default or 5%, 50%, full scan, whatever. But control your stats, updates, and how often they're being done. So again, keep the optimizer happy. Marlon asks, how do you balance between the frequent stats updates vis-a-vis plan recompiles? If I do them at midnight, when those queries start executing that need a new plan, they're not all happening at once. If I do it in the middle of the day, end users might feel that for a little while. Recompiles are generally pretty quick, and they only have to recompile. Presumably, they only have to recompile once. But I'm sure there are places where it's happened, but I've not seen that be a major point of contention with an overnight stats job. So if I'm doing stats and index type work, that's going to be overnight outside of the time frames that the backups and the CheckDBs are running. I try not to have any of these basic things collide. That's my ultimate goal. So I've really not seen it to be that big a problem. If you've got a 5 billion row table and you're doing 200 wide columns, 200 columns wide, and you're trying to do a full scan, that's going to take a while. That's going to use a lot of resources and whatnot. But overall, and if any of you know stats are stored, let me know. Unlike indexes, they're just not on regular pages and all that. I know they're stored in a histogram and up to 200 buckets and all that fun stuff. 200 buckets worth of ranges of data and all that, at most 200, 201, something like that. Which a lot of us have complained that that's not enough anymore. But yeah, you can go in and you can look at stats and you can go in and see the history of them, the histogram of them and what they're on and all that. If you're going to get really nerdy with it, there's a lot of documentation out there from guys like Brent and Eric and whatnot that have detailed all that out. So the SSD note does not really matter for the most part. Brent likes to tell us that you get maybe 5% improvement by defragging an index, whereas updating stats might get you 5 times or 10 times the improvement. His numbers are verified, presumably by his own experiences, but I've seen similar things on mine where the fragmentation just didn't matter that much. Demo. Hello, maintenance plans. Here we come again. All right. I'm not going to go into all the details as far as how to do this part because you've already seen most of it. So we go over to the toolbox, and we've got index is in this one. Rebuild actually does completely build you a new index. It's more obtrusive. It's gonna drop what you have and make a new one. That's not exactly how it works, but it's close. Reorganize is a lighter level where it shuffles things around inside the pages that already exist. With rebuild, you get new stats because it's technically a new index at that point. And then update statistics is its own task. I would put index work, if you were doing it in maintenance plans, I would put a rebuild task and a reorganize task, but I would change the default parameters. Let's just go to the, just for fun. Oh yeah, double clicking puts it in here too, but I like them to be in the middle of the screen. Select the coffee database. I have no indexes on that, so it's not going to matter. But right here, this is a rebuild task only if the fragmentation is over 30%, but that page count of 1,000 just makes me twitch. Fast, the percentages in here, this is going to, it's a default in here somewhere. I'm not able to see what I want to see. But this is basically what it looks like. This is some of the stuff that you're able to change. Didn't used to be the case. You can do tables, views. Presumably this is talking about indexed views, since regular views don't actually hold any data. But this is where you would set this up. We'll just take that. And let's pretend, because I haven't shown you this yet, that we want to do some rebuilds and then we want to do some reorganize as a thing. And you just drag this over here and you can link the two together, very much like an SSIS package, because it is an SSIS Lite framework that's behind here. And this looks very similar. Again, we'll pick the coffee database. And this is 15%. They've upgraded. I don't know when this happened. This used to be 5, if I remember correctly. So it was 5 and 30 is when Microsoft defaults to. Anything below 5, don't touch it. 5 to 30 or 15 to 30 now, apparently. Reorganize, over 30, rebuild. So the more fragmented they get, the more aggressive approach they take by default. And it's still sitting there at 1,000 pages. But at least now it has to be something that has been used recently. That statistic has to have been touched, or the index has to have been touched. So an ancient index that's fragmented, they don't care about, apparently. So that's kind of cool. But I don't trust these things, and these are kind of hard to go in and change compared to some other methods, but this is what Microsoft offers you out of the I'm not going to put a schedule on these. We're going to run this ad hoc if we ever do. But so let's make a stats one, just because we haven't done that yet. These are all still the very basic maintenance items that make my top 3 list. Oh, by the way, if you ever invite me to come in and look at your server and I see this, I'm going to tell you to delete it immediately. You would have to be pretty extreme for a shrink database task to actually be a good thing. Shrinking databases on a schedule is rarely required, and it's just causing all kinds of other issues, fragmentation mostly. All right, so update stats. We'll just go with all user databases. I don't think I've checked that box yet for you. You have choices here. Remember I said early on, you have indexes have stats at the index level. And if there's a column that it is not out there, it'll have its own stats because it's been queried on. That's when those get used in a query. And it's going to read something like underscore sys underscore WA for Washington. Probably not what it stands for, but that's what Microsoft is. Underscore a bunch of other stuff that kind of identifies a column in like hex looking format or something. So those are system generated ones because SQL Server needed them. Don't go in and just randomly delete those. They're useful. But we're going to let them do that. And here's the percentage. It's going to do a full scan by default. No, we're going to do a 5% sample because that's probably pretty reasonable for most tables. If you've got heavily skewed data where 90% of your stuff is one customer and the other 10% is the other 1,000 customers, you might need a bigger sample size. Set what's appropriate, measure it, look at it, see your query performance, and if maybe it's guessing it and getting wildly inaccurate stats estimates. That you can see in query plans after in the actual execution plans. So we would schedule this to run every night, index periodically if needed on the way out the door. So again, refresh just to be able to see the work you just did actually exist. Okay, question time because I need to breathe and have a sip of my lovely coffee here. Throw Jeff some questions. Or don't if you don't feel like it. Nothing coming in, that's fine. Let's make this thing bigger again. So to summarize the stuff I've already repeated myself ad nauseum on, backups, backup, and test your restores. Better to have more backups than not enough. No one wants to give you disk space to do backups until they had an outage, and they yell at you for why didn't we have any backups, and you point to the email that says you wouldn't give me disk space, that's why. CheckDB, more often than not, is better. Indexes we just talked about overall, so it's fresh. And you can automate this stuff using the SQL agent and the maintenance plans combined, or third-party products, or write your own SQL code, or community scripts from people that are big in our community and like to give back. Robbie says, I've seen the fill factor set to 80% on production indexes. Will there be any impact from this? Yes, you're wasting 20% of every page. When you go let's say you go do a rebuild, and the pages were largely full, you just made all of them be 20% empty. So you now have a lot more pages than you did, especially on a big table. The reason this used to be a normal thing in the spinning disk days, the fidget spinners, you wanted to avoid, at least for a little while, page splits because a page got full, because page splits are expensive. Came instant file initialization, and they became less expensive or less time consuming. I guess time is a thing that can be spent. I set them to 100 now, and I've seen nobody have any downside with that, but I have more compressed things than somebody at 80%. Changing that also very often leads to somebody setting it to 20 because they want to leave 20% free, and what they did is they left 80% free. People get confused on that setting. I tell them to leave it alone. Especially in the SSD days now, I want to have things as compact as I can without going into like compression unless that's really needed. You know, I compress archive data all the time just to make it take up less space because it's useless and never queried. If it's just there for legal reasons and we never touch it, compress it. But yeah, it's a great question, Robbie. Thank you for that. All right, so putting it all together, what's my next slide? Final tips. Nah, we're not going to do that yet. Of you that got really tired of watching me drag stuff over here and over there and then schedule jobs and refresh everything, all the stuff I just did, taking only the samples or just the simplest things, took me probably a solid 10 minutes of dragging and dropping. Jeff, if you haven't already, throw that Ola link in the chat. Ola Hallengren. You may have heard of him, you may not. All of us in the DB world have. Ola is not a company, it's a guy out of, I want to say, Norway. He worked for Saxo Bank. I think he used to work at Microsoft. He did all this for you, which is kind of cool. I normally wouldn't do this, but he puts out a solution. It's free. You can't buy a support agreement, and it's so popular. DBAs all over the world know how to support this, and there's all kinds of Google and Stack Exchange support for this. So we open up this script, and it's huge. Look at this ridiculous amount of stuff, which it's really cool because I only need to look at this part to put this in place. So check this out. Normally I don't put things in the system databases, but for this demo I'm going to because I don't have a DBA database on here. I'm going to put this into the MSDB. I want to create the jobs, yes. Declare the backup directory, nah. It's already been declared right here, so I don't need to do that. Backup URL, nah. Cleanup time, oh sure. Somebody just asked about retention. I'm going to keep my full backups for 3 days because I'm doing them every day. So 72 hours. Go. Now check out my jobs. There's a bunch of system backups. Make this a little bit bigger for you. Full or differential full log. CheckDB for system. CheckDB for you. Index rebuilding. Clean up after myself. Get rid of old things. Get rid of some other old things. Get rid of the physical files. All that is done for you. All you've got to do come on, is schedule it. All these not scheduled, those jobs are created, but they're not going to start running. You just go put a schedule on them at whatever makes sense for yours, and it's done. That's it. This is using it's Ola putting a wrapper around Microsoft code. So if you were to go in and look at this index optimized job, you're going to see almost nothing in the step except user databases and do some logging on it. Because it's wrapping around, going through all your indexes, checking the fragmentation, and then it's doing the same 5 or 15 and 30% numbers that Microsoft puts out. It's doing the same 1,000 pages. So this is just a super easy way to Microsoft script and get away from the maintenance plan, dragging and dropping and trying to troubleshoot, because it's just really cumbersome to do that, especially when you got SIG manager standing in your queue yelling at you about the database is down and why are things not working, or you know, whatever situation may have been a maintenance problem and a job was failing. I use this, I put this in everywhere, and I tell all my clients, we do this because we want to leave you with something that you didn't have to pay for and is widely supported by whoever follows me, your new employee, your next firm, whatever. So that's our standard. We standardize on a lot of different community tools because Microsoft gets really close and then the community makes them better. This is an example of that. Use OLA when you can. Company won't allow it, so be it. Use the maintenance plans. Okay. Teddy says, what? I know who TT is now. Ha! Teddy, I know your last name. What is your recommended backup retention strategy? Whatever managed specs in conjunction with whatever disk space you have. Because if a 3-day-old backup is absolutely useless and kill the company, you probably don't need to keep any more than that. I mean, might save you from absolute death, but without knowing anything else, I assume 2 weeks because I made that number up and it sounds good to most management that they can go as far back as 2 weeks if they have to. That's for the fulls. You know, I don't retain transaction logs back that far, going all the way back 2 weeks, because then when you take the next full, that kind of makes a whole new chain of logs. So that's one of those weird cleanup things I'm not going to get into, but just assume 2 weeks until they're going to tell you that you're using up too much disk space, and then you got to shorten it, and you make them tell you what the retention policy is. Management has to tell you what RPO and RTO are. For those of you who haven't heard the terms, recovery point objective is how much data can we lose and not die. When you ask them what RPO is, they're going to say we can't lose any data. When the database is down and you tell them you're going to lose half an hour of data, they're going to be happy because it's either all or half an hour. You win. Recovery time objective, RTO, is how fast or how long can we be down is probably the better way to say it before things just go to hell in a handbasket, or we've got to activate our formal disaster recovery plan. If that time is very narrow, you need to be looking into an HA situation like availability groups or log shipping even, because you can bring a log shipping secondary back online pretty quick. Putting it all back together takes longer, but you know, if you're log shipping every 5 minutes and it's restoring every 5 minutes, you've probably got a good 5-minute RPO right there. But if somebody drops a table or does an update without a where clause, an HA solution is going to very quickly make that oops go to the other nodes. And if your log shipping restores are happening very quickly, you've got about 5 minutes before that oops too on the secondary. So be careful with that. Robbie, I have seen a reindex job fail with the error transaction log full. Yes, because reindexing does use transaction log space. How should I tackle this? Should we rebuild? It's up to you on what you rebuild and how often. If you're on SSDs, I've said this like 13 times maybe. Do you need to rebuild it? If you're on Enterprise Edition and you got 2 terabytes of RAM, really do you need to rebuild it? And if so, I'm going to go Brent here. What problem are you trying to solve by rebuilding an index when you have that much memory? If you don't have that much memory, I'm with you, brother. I can't tell you what size you need to rebuild at. It depends on your server, your situation. But the bigger issue is, why did your transaction log fill? Did you not have enough space for it? Did it run up against a drive limitation, or was there a cap on it could only be 10 gigs when it needed 11? The root cause of that error is the transaction log file itself, or was it full because it never backed it up? I talked about that 2 terabyte file earlier. I get customers that I've had for years and years and years that came to me initially because their log file was full and it filled the hard drive and they didn't know what to do about it without messing up their database or trying to delete a log file because they didn't think it was necessary. And some of our best customers came from that very question. What do we do? What do we check to verify if agent jobs are working properly? That's a good one. I like that. We have scripts for that here, but from a GUI perspective, if you open up this job activity monitor, I like to make things big so I can see them. I want to look at this last run outcome. I want to look for things that failed, or even more simple, I look for red X's right here, because if a job fails, no, sorry, that's not that red X, that's a disabled job. But if it fails, it's going to have a red circle with an X in it. You will have gone into the job and you will have set up notifications to email the DBA team when the job fails. For maintenance type jobs, you want the DBAs to know about it, even if you're the DBA and your actual title is developer. To do this, you need to set up agents and you need to have an SMTP server and set up database mail to make all that happen. But once you get past that little tiny hurdle, then you can set any job or create alerts in SQL Server to notify you about all kinds of different things. Certain error messages like 823, 24, 25, those are all corruption. You want to know immediately when corruption is detected so you can respond to it quickly. If you've got a send out the emails to the new customers stored procedure that runs, if that job fails, you probably want to know about that. Or the sales manager wants to know about that. Have it send one to him. All right there in the job activity monitor. So for high visibility, then you look at it job by job. What else? We have 5 minutes left. And Jeff, if I was supposed to talk about something and I forgot, let me know. Oh, here comes one. Okay, TempDB drive is full on prod. Need to set up a job to alert or fix accordingly. If you can do certain things for the drive full, you can set the data files and log files caps to where they can't fill the drive. It would, where they leave a gig free or something like that. If you're filling, somebody help me out. If you're filling data files, I believe it's an 1105 error that gets fired. You can set up an alert in SQL Server. Over here on the screen, alerts right here is where you would do that. New alert, and then error number 1105, and then fill in the rest of the boxes as appropriate. So when you have a data file, that any one of the data files that you've got for TempDB pops you an email that it filled up. In that case on TempDB, you might get away with it for a little while. Set up another one for 9000, which is your log file filling up. Yes, I did those from memory because I've seen them a lot. Dan, I've never used CLR in my life because that sounds like a programmer thing. And I'm not a programmer. I don't even pretend to be one anymore. I do have clients that do a lot of C# store procedure stuff and all that. I just like using the stuff that is built into the product and that you can GUI your way through when I'm not full time there or long term there. And we're a consulting firm. We never know if a customer is going to leave for whatever reason or the next one's going to come in. I like to leave things in place that they can whip out the credit card, Microsoft, and ask for help. And database mail is one of those things. It's not terribly full featured, but it's okay. It's meant to do things like alerts. There are other ways to do larger number of emails, things like stuff to customers and all that. Use a third-party product for that, not the database mail. Is just because it's just not meant for that kind of scale, especially with what we do today. Database mail hasn't changed functionally all that much in the last 20 years. Same with replication. It hasn't changed since 2000, give or take. A couple little things here and there. Yep, I'm old. Story time. Just a little one. I did 2 separate contracts at Microsoft supporting SQL Server Premier customers, version 7 in 2000. So I've got a lot of versions and a lot of history under my belt, and that's why you'll occasionally hear me say something that is no longer a better practice. And I think Jeff Moden, you're the one that taught me not to say best practice anymore if you're still here. So thanks for that. Better practices, because better than yesterday may not be the best thing tomorrow, or the newest advancement in hardware or whatever. It's an ever-changing enterprise-level system that we're talking about here that has a lot of stuff. There are 5 separate careers, if not more, in this one product. Report writer, analyst, DBA, developer, BI stack, and that's off the top of my head, just in SQL Server. It's the lifeblood of many companies. It's an afterthought for a lot of Oracle shops because they got a random SQL box over in the corner. Nobody knows what it does, but it deserves to be well maintained. And this is the basis of every agreement we do with a new client. We run health checks and whatnot. We look for all of these things around reliability and performance and availability. That's day one for us with a new client, is we check to see where we stand, because we're not going to touch a server that's never been backed up. That's the first thing we're going to tell them to do, and then we sit back and wait. If they want us to do it, sure, we'll do it. And we want to know that the corruption checks have been done, that we don't have any of those, because If we know that before we touch it, we can't get blamed for it. And it's not about shifting blame, it's about the best thing for the client. Those are the things we need to let them know immediately. You have these issues that are affecting your company. Okay, well, it's 1:50 my clock. I don't know what your clock does because I don't know where you are, but I appreciate everybody coming.